All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you this week from Montreal. All right, everybody, well, today we are going to be revisiting an old case that I've covered previously on this channel. That would be the 2010 disappearance of Kyron Horman. Now, we've just seen 8 years since the disappearance. It's actually been 8 years in June. Right now I'm recording this in October, so it's been quite a long time, and a lot of the media coverage has really kind of faded out when covering the case of Chiron Horman. Chiron disappeared from his school, Skyline Elementary School, in Multnomah County, Oregon, and, this really received a lot of attention in the Pacific Northwest. When you're researching the case of Chiron Horman on YouTube, they have so many clips from, the local media, like from news stations. I mean, it received an enormous amount of coverage for the Oregon and Washington state media sources. I had actually misremembered something. It's been about it's been a while since I was getting back into the case of Chiron Horman, and I had thought that it was in Washington state. I made a little bit of a mistake, but yes, this of course was in Oregon. I guess I had been I guess they were showing some maps close to the Canadian border, and I guess I wasn't thinking too clearly, but yeah, to be very precise, this was in Oregon, Multnomah County. Now, what on earth happened? Well, I think the reason why news outlets in the Pacific Northwest really wanted to discuss the case of Chiron Horman is because of his stepmother, Terri Horman, and her friend Dee Dee Spicer. This just erupted into sort of a scandalous case. It erupted into a story of deceit, and of course they threw in some sensationalism. What happened was, they had a science fair at Skyline Elementary School, where Chiron Horman was a student, and, the science fair was the day before he disappeared. And, the day after the science fair, they did something where, it was like an open house. I think that's the best way to describe it. An open house where the parents were allowed to come in and view the science fair projects. Chiron had done his project on the red-eyed tree frog, and his stepmother, Terri Horman, even took photos of that. She posted the photos online onto Facebook, but it wasn't until about 3 o'clock or 3:30 in the afternoon that she actually posted the photos on Facebook. Some people are even insinuating that that's something suspicious. Someone left a comment on the last one that we discussed in the True Crime Q&A about how that's kind of abnormal behavior. I mean, if someone has, a data connection, they normally would post photos to Facebook instantly. But let's talk about that in a second. All right, then Terri Horman leaves Chiron Horman, to continue onward with a normal school day, and he is never seen again. The only possibility is that there was one sighting of Chiron by some doorways by a fellow student at about 9 a.m. But in reality, that is just kind of a potential sighting. I believe that's just sort of, another young student believed he saw Chiron Horman walking down the hallway. Well, what on earth happened? Well, first I need to say that this is one of the cases that was just absolutely puzzling, absolutely perplexing to me. I spent several days, with this back in 2016, going through everything day by day, and I just couldn't compose a single theory. It was like nothing seemed to go anywhere. All the attention was on Terri Horman, but, it's just like, we have video surveillance of her at a Fred Meyer with her younger daughter. They went to two different grocery stores, Fred Meyer, Pacific Northwest, giant mega store for people out there. And at one of them, they definitely purchased items. But the point is, they're seen on a security camera at two different grocery stores, no signs of Chiron. I mean, that is, showing us very definitive evidence that he was not with them at the store. The only possibility would be that if Terri Horman had lured him out, he would have been waiting in the car, where she would just sort of said something like, now don't get out of the car, we'll be right back, or something like that. But in reality, I mean, on this channel, I kind of just give people the theories that I believe straightforward. I don't really like to, twist and turn. I don't believe Terri Horman took Chiron out of school. I don't believe that Terri Horman abducted Chiron, and I don't believe that she killed him, which many people do insinuate. They do believe that she did something, to cause his death. I believe she's responsible for his death, and, it's very difficult to say that stuff out loud. I believe that she had some sort of connection. I just don't think she was the one that did it physically. It's more likely that, based on this sort of open house thing, there were a lot of adults coming in and out of the school. It's most likely Chiron was lured to another car by a male individual, and that man probably did something very horrible to him. Does Terri Horman have a connection to that? Most likely. But, I can't say with 100% certainty. That is just kind of an interpretation of the material that's been put out online. It's just an interpretation that, I guess, what do you want to call it, a gut instinct? Because Terri Horman is someone who has an enormous amount of suspicious behavior. There was this giant story, though, that even, she possibly talked about murdering her own husband, Kane Horman, Chiron's father. And, someone named Rodolfo Sanchez, who was a landscaper for the Hormans, even got in touch with the police about it. He testified in a deposition. Now, the new things that I've learned about that case over the last couple years, Rodolfo Sanchez, is he went back to Terri Horman and said, hey, remember that time you told me to kill your husband and you were going to give me $20,000? And if I understand what her response was, she was like, no, what are you talking about? But after cross-examination from the attorney, from Terri Horman's attorney, Sanchez revealed, that he was just kind of infatuated with Terri Horman. He was attracted to her, and I believe it was just he was either just being very inappropriate, or he was kind of frustrated about the whole situation, so he made up that story. It's very likely that story about Terri Horman offering Rodolfo Sanchez $20,000 to kill her husband was not true. That just makes this case even more bizarre. Now, this thing is called Kyron Horman 8 years later, right? To give a very grim outlook on this, I often find that when we have these missing persons cases, normally when it goes on for years and years and years, it's like I really get the feeling that the victim passed away very shortly after their disappearance. And we've seen that from a variety of true crime cases. And, I was just looking again at the case of Tara Calico, and that seems to be one of the largest theories going on in her particular instance. Once again, someone passing away very shortly after their disappearance, sometimes even the day of their disappearance. And I believe that is most likely what happened to Chiron. There was a sort of rumor that some, I guess you'd say, search dogs found some sort of evidence related to Chiron in the forests near the Oregon-Washington border, if I understand correctly. But I don't know what amounted out of that. It's like, Chiron Horman was 10 years old, right? No, sorry, he might have even been as young as 7 years old, actually. I'd have to double-check that. The point is, he was very, very able to recall his mom, his dad, his life in Oregon. This isn't, taking a 3-year-old or something who would slowly, repress the memories. Someone's 7 to 10 years old. They're going to remember things very clearly, and if they had any ability to try and contact their guardian, their parents, their family, they would probably try to do that stuff. And, of course, also, even at 7 years old, you're probably going to know your phone number. Definitely by 10 years old, you're going to know the family phone number and always know how to get in contact with them as soon as you possibly can. Well, what happened to Kyron Horman? I mean, we have the possibility of someone abducting him. Like I said, my personal instinct on that one is that there was a male who lured him to his car. There were lots of adults going in and out of the school. He was almost like a prime target, for abductions. As disgusting as that sounds, but yes, I mean, as far as I know, there is no security footage, but we do have a sighting of, I believe it's a white truck that was kind of, some people think there is something suspicious about it. That could have been the vehicle that Chiron got into. Once again, it's very likely that an older man lured him to his car and then, drove him somewhere and did something horrible to him. But why do people focus on Terri Horman so much? The biggest reason is because they believe that she was vengeful. They believe she was dealing with a very rocky marriage. They don't like these sort of things in her story. I mean, she was just kind of driving up and down this road called the 40, just like back and forth, and people were like, well, what on earth were you doing? And she was like, well, it's the only way I can get my baby to go to sleep, It was the only way to get her youngest kid to go to sleep. And whether that's true or not, only Terri Horman knows, but it's like, I mean, for parents, I can only imagine you're going to do whatever you have to do to get your kid to go to sleep. Moreover, we do have the sightings at the Fred Meyer that I mentioned, no signs of Chiron. It's just, I really just noticed that it seemed like a woman just going about her day, to be honest. I didn't get any sort of red flags that she had taken Chiron out of school. If she had done anything, she would have simply just told somebody else to take Chiron, because this is an enormous coincidence, is it not? You're having all these marital disputes, and then you tell somebody to, and then then your stepson goes missing. That's what I mean. Like, I get the feeling that Terri Horman must have said something to somebody about Chiron. That's just kind of a gut instinct. But if Chiron had been abducted by this person, this man that I've kind of theorized about, well, where did they go? It's like they could have gone to Canada, they could have gone to Mexico. It's God only knows at that point, and it's just like, but the Canadian border is not far away from Oregon, and even Mexico isn't that far away in the scope of things. It would be so easy to disappear into an international setting. But once again, my personal belief is that Chiron is no longer alive, and that this person who took him, whoever did, get involved with the disappearance of Kyron Horman, ended his life. It's kind of just like, that's just sort of a conclusion we find very frequently with missing persons cases that go on for years and years. It's like, and it's terrible. It's very sad, and I really wish things didn't come to that. And places like Skyline Elementary, I believe, they got security cameras installed because of this disappearance. I mean, if they just had some cameras in their parking lot, they would have seen where Chiron had gone, at least in the direction that he would have been walking, whether he was by himself or unassisted. And this was 2010, so I'm really hoping that a lot of things would have stepped up in terms of security, and a lot of things would have been improved for schools all around America and Canada, and anywhere in the world, pretty much. Anyone that has the capabilities to do something like that. And I mean, we're talking about something just like a basic surveillance system, and also having people, crossing guards, security guards. There's just, this enormous conversation going on in America right now. Do we need more security in our schools? And a lot of people push that toward things like, the Second Amendment and gun-related issues. But what about, just people who are present to see what's going on, so that, even if, a police officer or a security guard wouldn't have been able to stop the disappearance of Chiron Horman, they would have been like, yeah, I did see that kid. He was walking, and he was walking toward a car that is this color, and those type of clues that lead to solving a case. Because this is one, where it's like, maybe there's a bit of media sensationalism going on, but so many things just erupted into this giant firestorm. I mean, what really happened, though, with Terri Horman and Rodolfo Sanchez, the landscaper? I mean, so many just negative things are going on. Like, you have, this report that she offered him $20,000 to kill her husband, and then, he kind of retracted that during a cross-examination from her lawyer. But at the same time, there it is, You're being accused of trying to plot the murder of your husband. Your stepson has gone missing and you're the prime suspect. I mean, is she just like a bad luck magnet? Or is she someone who is doing bad things and all this, negativity is on her for a reason? That is why I personally believe that, I believe she's much shadier than she leads on, and it's possible that there is something going on with Terri Horman that, she could have just told somebody to do something to Chiron. She could have just let somebody know where Chiron would be and that person targeted him. She could have just made a simple sentence like that. I mean, she doesn't do herself any favors during her interviews and discussing things. She comes across as someone who is kind of shifty, where she's like trying to be deceptive. The first time I ever heard about this case was actually on an episode of Dr. Phil, and I think this might be one of the only cases I've talked about on this channel that I actually heard from Dr. Phil the first time. I've mentioned him a couple other times, like during the Burke Ramsey interview, but I thank that show for introducing me to the case of Chiron Horman and doing some national exposure on it, so it's expanded these types of discussions. But the big thing we want to know is, if Chiron did pass away, if Chiron is no longer with us, what do we need to solve the case? What we sort of need is maybe some more information from Terri Horman. We really would need to know if that sighting by his male peer at the sort of saying that he saw Chiron by the doorways at 9 a.m., if that is correct. I mean, what if that's not correct? I mean, what if he went out a different entrance? That is, just almost like hearsay at this point. That is a pure testimonial. I mean, what if that kid is mistaken? I mean, that's always kind of bothered me. People are putting so much stock in that. But I really have to insist, I believe somebody lured Chiron into his car, and that person did something very terrible to him, and that person ended his life and disposed of Chiron's body. And this case may never get solved. It might go unsolved forever, but I wish I had more to contribute. But, 8 years have gone by, and other than, trying to zone in on Terri Horman and her friend Dee Dee Spicer that might be possibly implicated in this as well, something just stands out very, very strongly about Terri Horman. She has all of these terrible things coming at her. She's like a point of convergence, everything just kind of is zoning in on her like the epicenter of all these terrible things. There's something destructive that was going on with her back in 2010. So that's all I can really say. If you have anything to say at all about the disappearance of Chiron Horman, please drop a comment below, and let's just expand the discussion. Let's talk a little more. Let's share some ideas. What do you think happened to Chiron Horman? Do you think that he was murdered? Do you think he was abducted? Or do you think that he just left the school on his own accord and was the victim of some terrible accident? Or do you believe that it was indeed Terri Horman running the entire thing, that she got Chiron out of school somehow, she told him to walk out of the school and go back to their car, and then she did something to him, like murder, and then she disposed of his body somewhere in the Pacific Northwest? If you have anything to say at all, drop a comment below.